Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Minister. I'm going to turn to a discussion around flood adaptation and page 130 of the main estimates and line 4.4. I think earlier in an earlier answer you said that was where we're capturing the flood mapping work that's underway. Yeah. So I just want to dig a little deeper into that, and you'll recall from our discussions at the Public Accounts Committee not so long ago that there was a discussion about the approach you're taking to flood mapping in terms of whether those maps are taking into account substantial flood mitigation infrastructure. Because in the past, I understand that the mapping was done essentially just naturalized water flows that don't take into account major barriers like a permanent dam, for example, or something like the Springbank Flood Mitigation Project. I just wanted to confirm that in fact that is the approach that your department will take to these flood maps to take into account some of the larger scale mitigation efforts.
Yes, I believe so, and I also believe is ADM Conrad here. Okay, Rick, I will defer for more detail on this to Rick Blackwood, who is the Land Use Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Rick Blackwood, Environment and Parks. Yes, we're working very closely with Municipal Affairs on our new flood mapping protocol that will take great consideration in regards to how mitigation planned and installed can future affect our mapping product.
I ask again, perhaps to Mr. Blackwood or to you, Madam Minister, when you work with Municipal Affairs, and as you get, and I understand that the Bow River and Elbow flood hazard studies are close to being completed, when those maps are issued, one of the concerns that may raise is if that map now shows a substantially higher number of businesses and residents in the floodway, if that's done absent some context of what that may mean policy-wise, both in terms of mitigation but also in terms of land use, and I'm very glad to hear you're working with Municipal Affairs, that could cause a great deal of anxiety at the very least and perhaps substantial impact on property values so I'm just curious where we are in that process in terms of timing and what consideration you'll give in terms of context when those maps are released.
Sure. So Municipal Affairs is the lead ministry for the flood development reg. They led a two-phase stakeholder consultation, and certainly there will be a 2-year delay in the effective date for a couple of places, the town of Drumheller and the RMWB as well. I think if there's a little bit more detail to provide, Rick.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the question. We're very much of the mind, as you'd mentioned, and have been working very closely with the Calgary Community River Action Group and Bowness and Sunnyside in Calgary, because we're very much aware of the issues that you raised in regards to how the flood fringe and the floodway are delineated and how those impacts on property value.
Thank you very much. Minister, I just want to pick up on something you've said there, the 2-year delay in the effective date of those maps. What exactly does that mean?
It's for Drumheller and RMW, the regional municipality of.
What is the impact of it being delayed 2 years? I'm not quite sure what that.
I think they were based on unique circumstances. So there's some historical development patterns in place there, and there's some real impracticalities in terms of some of those. Communities need to make further progress on flood mitigation and some of our investments. We also need to gain clarity on the possible use of special policy areas for municipalities like them and others. Always development decisions are guided by each municipality's land use bylaw and policies, including those pertaining to flood hazard areas.
All right, I will delve a little deeper into this with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs later in the week, because I know that's their policy area. I just want to ask specifically now about flood mitigation projects. I know the Springbank project is something that Alberta Transportation is the project proponent on. But there was a berming project for Redwood Meadows and Bragg Creek, and I believe that was under your ministry previous. Is it still within your ministry, or has that been transferred to Alberta Transportation?
No, those two projects were funded through the Alberta Community Resilience Program that I spoke of earlier.
Okay, and what's the status of those projects? Are they in progress?
I may have to take that as an undertaking because we have so many of these projects. In fact, I will do that. I will take it as an undertaking. It's just easier.
Okay, thank you, and apologies if Mr. Blackwood has to come back up. I just want to ask about the timing around when the Bow River hazard and the Elbow River flood hazard studies are going to be completed. I know that they're in progress. I understand your department's issued some documentation with some updated timelines of the various components of that. I'm just curious, it looks like there's areas that are complete, there's areas that are in late stage and approaching completion. I just want to get a sense if that can be translated into days or months or targets for timelines.
Again, Rick Blackwood, Environment and Parks. It's our hope to have both of those studies complete late this year. And we'll also be working very closely with the City of Calgary on how we move forward with the Bow River Working Group report that was provided to us as well.
Well, that's a fantastic segue, because that's my next question. Is Bow River Working Group just where is that? Because while I know that there is a plan, slow as it may be, on the Elbow River with the Springbank project, and again recognizing that's not within your purview, but I know the Bow River Working Group is within Environment and Parks, and the flood risk on the Bow River is substantial. And I know that there's discussions potentially about some pretty major upstream infrastructure, a retention dam potentially on the Bow River. That's a very long timeline, but I just want to get a sense of where we are with the Bow River Working Group, what the next steps are, and how soon we may actually see some progress there.
As I understand it, Honourable Member, we've made a commitment to funding 2 feasibility studies with respect to the Bow River Working Group's recommendations. There's no question that at least one of their recommendations comes with a very hefty price tag, and so will have to be taken into account in future capital plans. There's no question about that. But first we need to start with the feasibility work, and the precise nature of those studies I will defer to Rick Blackwood.
Yeah, we've been in contact with the City of Calgary, and our counterparts at the city and ourselves will be working on a very collaborative process for the feasibility study, and we'll also be using the Bow River Working Group model to help move us forward, because it was multi-sectoral based and very successful.
Thank you. I was very pleased to hear that that is going to continue. Are those feasibility studies captured, excuse me, within the line items 4 in page 130 of the budget? Is that where we'd find those?
No.
Is it sort of a small amount that's kind of captured in something bigger? It's not something we'd find as a line item. Okay, thank you very much. I do want to ask Minister about the impacts of logging in the Kananaskis on just the overall flood risk. Have you considered options to reduce deforestation or either eliminate clear cutting entirely or shift where that's happening as a means of addressing future flood risk?
With respect to the Kananaskis project, certainly the forestry minister can better answer questions on that, because he did require a number of setbacks and other environmental measures to control for exactly the risks that you identify, Honourable Member. And certainly when we phased out logging in the Castle Parks, one of the reasons was we were seeing a lot of linear disturbance and some headwaters concerns for sure. Okay. In terms of managing water on the landscape. I believe at this point that logging at Kananaskis is something that is within the forestry minister, and he has required a number of changes to forestry management practices. And we'll continue to monitor that going forward.
Okay, thank you. I just want to turn to the bigger question of adaptation. In your earlier set of answers, you said that's perhaps something you'd like to look more into. What is the status of the adaptation strategy coming from the Climate Change Office, which I assume CCO stands for? The Auditor General in their February 2018 report had identified this as being a shortcoming. Timing as to when we may expect some work on an adaptation analysis?
Sure. Well, we started with 3 projects to help inform our approach. So there was a meta assessment of climate science that we commissioned, projections of Alberta's future climate, and climate risk, because that's what climate adaptation is about, is understanding what the risks to infrastructure and to people and to health actually are. And then we also I moved forward with a resilience building project in the Kainai First Nation to get a better sense of Indigenous perspective.
And